Hey everyone, how's it going? This is Rob Craig here with another Geeksation Live Podcast, and this week we have the usual suspects. Dustin, how's it going, man?
Hey, pretty good, man.
Dakota, Big Goo, how's it going, man?
Uh-huh.
You say Oha again?
Yep.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that back because I think last time you said something different. But,
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad to finally be back. We kind of decided to, last week we didn't have a podcast, obviously. We decided to kind of do them every other week. We may not do that all the time. We may, some weeks do it every week, but we're going to kind of plan to probably do these every other week. So at least, until it picks up or something. But big news this week. I guess it was more last week, actually, wasn't it? When did they announce the Super NES Classic Edition pricing? I'm trying to remember the exact day.
I think it was last week.
Was it last week? I think it was either last weekend or it was early this week. But anyway, that was a big thing. Obviously, was that Nintendo announced finally a release date and pricing for that, and of course, all the games are going to be available on it. So that's going to be coming out September 29th. And that's going to be, which I was surprised at. I was actually expecting them to release it probably around like November, and around the time of the holiday rush, because that's when the NES Classic Edition came out, was like sometime in November. But it's actually going to be more expensive this time around. I believe it's $20 more expensive than the NES Classic Edition was. It's going to be priced at $79.99 suggested retail price. The NES Classic Edition, I believe, was $59.99. So yeah, that's a $20 difference. But I guess I figured, hey, people are going crazy over these and spending $300 on eBay, so we might as well jack up the price a bit.
Yeah, I mean,
they probably could have done $99.99 and people still would have bought it.
Oh yeah, I always thought the NES was kind of underpriced, honestly.
I mean, considering it had 20 or 30 games. I can't remember the exact number. It was 30 games. So this one has 21 games. So I know some people were complaining that it had a few less games than the NES Classic Edition. But still, man, I mean, considering the prices of some of these games right now, like if you were to go out and buy like an Earthbound cart, you're looking at like close to $200 for an original Earthbound cart. So, you can pick it up. Earthbound, if you never played it, you can pick it up on this bad boy for $80.
Pretty good deal. And one game in particular, which we'll discuss, you can't even buy.
Yeah, you can't buy it all. So I guess, let's go ahead and run down the list. So Contra 3 Alien Wars is on there. Great game. Donkey Kong Country, which, is in my top list, of course. Earthbound, as we mentioned. Final Fantasy 3. I know you're a big fan of that, Bond.
Yeah.
F-Zero, classic. That's the first SNES game I ever played. Kirby Superstar. Kirby's Dream Course. I never even heard of that one.
I haven't either.
I've never been a big Kirby fan, though. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, obviously.
Yeah, they would have passed that. If that one wasn't on it,
yeah.
There would have been riots.
Yeah, there have been riots. Mega Man X. Secret of Mana, Star Fox, and this is the big one, Star Fox 2. Like this has not even been available, period, other than like some ROMs that are out there, but they're not even the complete game. So, Bond, what do you know the story behind this? Like, why was Star Fox 2 not released?
So Star Fox 2. I mean, even the original Star Fox came out really late in the life cycle of the Super Nintendo, but Star Fox 2 was really late. It was like even after the N64 had already been released. So there's never really been a clear-cut answer on exactly why it was canceled. It just kind of faded from the pages of Nintendo Power and was never mentioned again. But from what I understand, they wanted to use some of the technology they developed for Star Fox 2 and some of the new gameplay ideas, and they eventually used a lot of them in the Star Fox 64.
Yeah, my understanding was that, they didn't want, even though, Star Fox was kind of one of those games, like you mentioned, that in the SNES cycle, that towards the end that started to use this kind of like pseudo 3D technology. And so obviously Donkey Kong Country was one. I mean, that game still holds up as like a really good looking game. But it wasn't real 3D, but it was kind of, like I said, like kind of a fake 3D. And Star Fox utilized it. Where's some other games?
Stunt Racer.
Yeah, Mario RPG is famous for using it. And basically, you know, how I understood it is that Nintendo at the time, since, you know, the N64 and the PlayStation were out and they had actual 3D graphics, you know, they didn't want them to go up, you know, head to head with the real 3D technology that was out there at the time, because it would just kind of look dated. So I think they were in a way kind of ashamed of it. So it kind of, you know, it was almost complete too. Like the game was, from my understanding, like something like 85 to 90% complete when they canned it. So the developers actually went ahead and finished the game, but it just was never released. And interestingly, at some point, one of the developers, how I understand it, released like a copy to the, you know, out in the wild, but it wasn't like the full game. It was like the you know, the semi like completed version. So this one that's going to be released is actually the 100% completed version that has never ever been released before. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and interestingly, there was another version of Star Fox 2 that was even less complete. It was like, you know, like 50 to 60% complete, and apparently that copy was stolen from E3 by some random fan.
Wow. Huh. That's interesting. I never read that. That's cool.
What?
But yeah, isn't it weird, like that, you know, what, 20 plus years later, this game's finally being released? It's insane.
Surprising how crazy people's going over it too.
Oh, it's so cool. I mean, that right there is like the icing on the cake. I mean, the system itself, with all the games that it had, even the 20 games that it comes with, aside from Star Fox 2, is a great deal. And then you add the Star Fox 2 in the mix, and it's like, wow, you know?
Yeah, that's just like over the top.
This thing is going to be hot. Like, I mean, this thing for any Nintendo fanboy is going to be like the must-own thing this holiday.
Yeah,
and for scalpers, it's going to be the must. Yeah. So.
Bright point I'm glad about, 5-foot cable on the controller.
Yeah, they did fix that. I like the SNES controller. I think it's one of the best controllers ever made.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of was the. Like if you were to look at any older controller, you can really point to like the SNES being the one that kind of paved the way for modern controllers.
For sure. I think we talked about this in another podcast, but Nintendo is directly responsible for the evolution of the controller as we know it today. You know, I mean, everything from analog sticks to trigger buttons and, you know, everything in between. Yep. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm pretty excited for it. I really hope that it's not as hard to get as the NES Classic Edition was, because I had to camp out for 8 hours to get mine. And of course, I'm not even going to keep it. It's going to be given away once we eventually reach 1,000 subscribers, which has been going slow as molasses. So at some point, you know, the next couple years, we might give that thing away. But it's still there. You know, I'm not backing out. I'm a man of my word. So
SNES Classic giveaway for 2,000.
Yeah, I'm definitely planning to pick one up for myself and then pick one up as a future giveaway as well. So I'm not sure, you know, the details of that. First, I want to get rid of this NES. But yeah, you know, I'm definitely going to be there, probably camping out release day with all the damn scalpers. So I'm not going to, we kind of talked about this before the show, whether or not I should admit, but I'll go ahead and come clean that I have done some scalping myself in the past. I'm not proud of it. And honestly, what's kind of changed my mind about scalping is, you know, my experience with the SNES or the NES Classic Edition, of actually wanting one for myself and not being able to get one because of scalpers. And I'll get into that story a little bit later. But let me just ask you guys this. Are there any games that you guys wanted to see that were added? I also want to say real quickly, I think Dakota is, you know, Bond is a little bit older than me. And so he definitely, you know, was big on SNES. I never owned an SNES up until like I was, you know, probably like in my 20s, because at the time I just never had one. I actually had a Sega back then. And so I was more of a Sega guy at the time. But, you know, I had friends and stuff that had SNES, and I preferred SNES. I wanted an SNES. I never had one. And, but it had way better games, you know, at the end of the day, like, when it comes down to like, when you think back to that war between Sega and Nintendo was by far the superior console.
I swear, I think
Yeah.
Ralph, you bought me my SNES.
Yeah. I had one. That was actually the first one I ever owned. And then, you know, that got passed on to you.
Yeah.
But, so over the years, I've kind of played a lot of the, you know, some of the classics and stuff, but there's also a lot I have, as far as consoles go, it's probably the one console that I had the biggest knowledge gap on, just because it's the one I never really owned as a kid. So, but anyway, I kind of got off on a tangent there. So the question was, Bond, are there any games that you would like to see that weren't included?
Oh, I mean, of course, yeah. I mean, definitely so. But I mean, I will say, I'm impressed with the lineup. I mean, the fact that they got so many good games from so many different developers. I mean, I can't complain too much. But there is one game that I think is a very notable omission, and that's,
I know exactly what you're gonna say.
Yep, Chrono Trigger, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really my favorite Super Nintendo game. That's one of my favorite. Well, like Final Fantasy 3, or as it's more properly known, Final Fantasy 6.
Yeah.
Is also right up there, but Chrono Trigger was just such a great game, and it's really influenced a lot of RPGs that came afterwards. So I would have loved to see that one.
Well, I'll also say I've never been an RPG guy, just because I'm like an ADD kid, and I still am, so I don't have the attention span for like super long games, right? And I get bored really easy of stuff, so like I just can't dedicate that kind of time to a game. But I do have fond memories of you know, as far as RPGs go, of watching you play Chrono Trigger back in the day, and I was really intrigued by it with all the time travel stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid, I was just blown away by that, because you would like I don't remember the game in like really great detail, but I do remember specifically there was like how you would go to like the town at like one era, and then like later on, like it was practically destroyed. And it really captured my imagination.
Yeah, I mean, like things you can do certain things in the past that'll like change the future.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was freaking cool. It had such a great story.
Is there any other games?
That's
the big one.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the big one. I mean, they've got like so many of the other games I love, like Mario Kart, Castlevania. They've even got like Ghouls and Ghosts and Punch Out.
The hardest game ever, pretty much. Ghouls and Ghosts. I think that's another game I've never even beat. Like, that game's just ridiculously hard.
But yeah, if I had to pick one other, just to kind of go on the same vein of like interesting like prototype games that have never been released, I would love to see like either the prototype of Super Mario World that we see in some like screenshots that looks like 100% different almost than the final game, or like there was a version of Killer Instinct 2. I'm not really a huge fan of that series, but that game was actually kind of like Star Fox 2, basically finished but never ultimately released.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many freaking games that were amazing for the SNES. SNES had one of the greatest libraries of all time, I think.
Yeah.
And so to kind of funnel that down into like 20 to 30 games, it really is difficult. And I think Nintendo did a great job. Obviously, it relies very heavily on first-party stuff, but of course, that's really the best stuff. At the end of the day, is always, Nintendo is their first-party stuff. So, of course, I mean, if you didn't have Donkey Kong Country or F-Zero or any of that, I mean, it just wouldn't be like, a great list. But I would like to see all the Donkey Kong Country games on there. I was actually kind of disappointed that they didn't, because, like with the Mario games on the NES Classic Edition, they had Mario 1, 2, and 3. So I was kind of hoping they would have Donkey Kong Country 1 through 3, and they only had the first one. So I definitely, I think that's kind of missing. I'm glad Super Castlevania is there, because I mean that's just fantastic. That's the best Castlevania game, hands down.
Definitely.
I mean, it's missing Super Bomberman.
Yeah. Oh yes, Bomberman would be amazing on there. I honestly thought the Super Bomberman games were the best Bomberman games ever made. Those were my favorites. I remember my neighbor had that, and oh my god, how much time we funneled into that freaking game.
I mean, Super Star Wars as well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a good suggestion. Like,
I mean, I doubt they'd put it on there just because of the licensing, but no Super Mario All Stars though. Also, is weird.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, I mean that
I
would
guess
have been a
probably-
good inclusion, but
yeah, I think they should have had that too. But I guess, the NES Classic Edition had the first 3 games, so they probably thought that was kind of redundant. But then again, I think what makes the All Stars better was because they had the updated graphics, and so I always was really intrigued by like how the sprites look so different in that version versus the originals, especially Mario 1. Like Mario 1, like when you look at Mario 1 graphics compared to Mario 3, like the huge upgrade that happened over the years, and even then, like with Mario All Stars, I always find it amazing like how much better even Mario 3 looks on there.
yeah, and like another cool thing about All Stars is they had the like
Lost
the
levels.
the lost levels, like the Japanese Super Mario 2.
Yeah.
Also, there's no Earthworm Jim.
No.
What?
There's so much stuff. There's so much stuff.
Now that you mention it, there is a lot that they could have added, but
You know what game, honestly, like I hate to admit this, but the one game on there that I want to play the most, because it's always been on my like list of games that I need to play before I die, and I've never played it, is Yoshi's Island.
oh yeah, you never played Yoshi's
I never played
Island?
Yoshi's Island, yeah, because that game came out
Wow.
really late in the cycle too. It was like, I think it came out around 95, right? When it was like 95 or 96. It was like it was around the time PlayStation came out. Is when that, so at that point, I'd already moved on to like, we were playing Twisted Metal and stuff like that. So
God, I keep having other games pop in my head, man. Like NBA Jam.
oh, another game I'd like to see on there. Like this is like I think one of the best SNES games ever made, and it's hugely underrated, I think. But Addams Family.
Oh
still have that
yeah.
cartridge.
Oh man.
Yeah, I still have that cartridge.
Yeah, that game is amazing. Yeah, that was the SNES that you have was the one that I had that game, and yeah, Addams Family was like a complete knockoff of Mario, but it was the best Mario knockoff ever made.
Oh, easily. That game was so ridiculously good. I mean, like all the like secret areas like in the mansion and like the awesome boss battles.
Oh man. And they really had some crazy secrets in that game. Like Mario's always been kind of known for cool secrets, but that game like took it above and beyond.
Yeah. Like, yeah, that's a great suggestion.
Like crazy trapdoors that would like go into like underneath the stairs or something. There's like a million 1-ups in there. Like such a good game, man. And that was like one of those like, like movie tie-in games always really sucked. They tended to always really suck. But that one was amazing.
Yeah, that has to be at least one of the top 10 movie tie-in games ever.
Oh yeah, and no one ever talks about that one. People always seem to forget about Addams Family. But yeah, I mean, like I'm glad Super Metroid's on there. What do you think is like the best? Would you say that Chrono Trigger is like the best SNES game of all time for you?
Yeah, I would say so.
Well, what about you, Dakota? What do you think is the best SNES game?
You kidding me? Link to the Past.
Yeah. I guess
I put Link to the Past over any other modern Legend of Zelda game except Breath of the Wild currently.
Well, can you guys guess what mine is?
Mario World.
Yeah, of course. And I always wish that Nintendo would have kept the Japanese title of Super Mario World, which was Super Mario 4.
I know. That bugs me that they didn't do that, actually.
I really wish they would have done that. Because to me, like that, like Super Mario World to me was like the last true good Super Mario game. Like at least the style I prefer. Like we kind of talked about this before, but I'm not like a huge fan of, Mario RPG or any of that. Like, the
like
Mario
3D
64. Yeah, like all the weird like spin-off. Like to me, they're like spin-offs. I'm not a big fan of that. And Mario Odyssey, the new one that's coming out, looks intriguing, but like at the end of the day, I'm still like, this isn't to me a true Mario game. But and I've talked about this before too. To me, like the true successor, 3D successor to Mario 1, 2, 3, and Super Mario World was Super Mario 3D Worlds for the Wii U. Like it kind of captures like all the like the feel and the gameplay of the original Mario's, but in a 3D environment. And, you know, it even has like the overworld stuff and like all the weird secrets. I don't know. That's like a highly underrated, probably the most underrated Mario game ever, in my opinion. And it's criminally underrated to the point that I really hope that Nintendo releases a port for the Switch at some point, so people who didn't have a Wii U could actually play it.
I'm sure they will at some point.
But, you know, one thing I think that's interesting is that, you know, since now we've got the SNES Mini, the NES Mini, like, do you think Nintendo will possibly release like an N64 Mini or maybe like a GameCube Mini in the future?
N64 Mini, oh man.
Yeah.
Of course, starring Ocarina of Time and Mario 64 on that one if they did it.
Well, see, and I was reading actually today an interesting like article where someone was saying that the SNES will probably be Nintendo's last mini console. And the reason being is that they didn't think that the N64 had the kind of library that would, you know, work well for a system like this. It just doesn't have as many like memorable games.
I mean, I would kind of agree, honestly. Really? I was never a huge fan. I mean, the Nintendo 64 is kind of like the major console that I probably like the least. Yeah. I mean, other than Mario Kart 64, I can't really think of any games on there that I really liked.
Did you have a 64? I can't remember.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. But I mean, I don't really like the 3D Marios, as we've talked about. I'm not a big fan of. I know this is absolute blasphemy, but I don't like Ocarina of Time. I only really Link to the Past is the only Zelda game I've ever liked.
Yeah.
Well, Majora's Mask was the better one of the two anyway.
Yeah, Majora's Mask I hear is a really weird one. I've never been like a huge Zelda fan myself, but I don't know. I have fond memories of the N64 just because, like, interestingly, like I also had at the time, I actually had an N64 before I had a PlayStation. Like, I never actually had a PlayStation like until later. Like most of my experiences playing PlayStation were also with you. So, but I had an N64 and it was actually the first console that I ever bought by myself with like my own money. You know, like when I went to the store, I made that decision of do I want N64 or do I want PlayStation? And I actually bought the N64.
Oh man,
yeah, I regret it now. Yeah, totally. I totally regret it. Like PlayStation was a far superior system, but you know, I had a lot of fun with my N64. Like I don't regret it in a way, I guess, because like although a lot of the games I really wanted were on PlayStation, like later I found out, I still had a lot of really good experiences on my N64.
I remember sitting there playing Perfect Dark.
Oh yeah, you know, like GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, stuff like that. I think you know, maybe it doesn't have as huge of a library as the SNES does, and maybe not as many classic titles. But I still feel like they could pump out like 20 classics out of that to put into, you know what I mean?
I mean, they could, but I think a problem with the 64 is a lot of these games that were classics at the time haven't aged nearly as well as like the SNES games. Because I mean, Mario World is still just as good as it ever was, but like GoldenEye and Perfect Dark, those are pretty clearly outclassed by modern FPS standards.
Yeah, true. I mean, and yeah, we've kind of talked about this before, but we've said before, I don't think we've said it in the podcast, that we really feel like, you know, NES, especially SNES, has aged very well.
Yeah.
But the like early 3D systems like the PlayStation and N64 haven't aged as good as like the SNES, just because of, you know, when you look at early 3D graphics, they're just like so sharp like such sharp polygons and stuff, and very low polygon count models that they just look like crap today.
Yeah, I mean, they looked kind of revolutionary at the time.
Yeah.
But today they're just hideous.
Yeah, at the time they were amazing. I remember being absolutely blown away by some of the stuff back then. But like now when you look back, it just hasn't aged well when you go back. And I mean, now we've got, multi-million polygon count models in video games to where they almost look like Lara Croft looks so damn real that you can see sweat going, rolling down her cheek. But back then, Lara Croft had, polygonal boobs.
Yeah.
Triangle
triangles.
Two pyramid heads sticking out of it.
So, but some of that stuff's still fun to go back and play, I mean, like I mentioned Twisted Metal earlier. I still like to go back and play that sometimes. But it definitely doesn't look as good as I remember though.
Oh yeah. Well, and another problem with the N64 is that like it had such a god awful controller.
Oh yeah, that controller was awful.
I mean, it did invent the analog stick, so I give them props for that. But I mean, that was
that was their worst. That was their worst controller.
Yeah.
Didn't they have a Rogue Squadron game on N64?
Yeah, I guess they did, and then they had like Shadows of the Empire.
Shadows of the Empire was amazing. That game, actually, you know what's funny is like that game right there. Okay, back in the day, like before I had an N64, Mom, would let me like rent one from Dillon's, like so like basically back then you could rent consoles from like the video department at like grocery stores and stuff. And so a few times she let me rent an N64, and of course the game I always rented with it was Shadows of the Empire. That game blew my freaking mind back then. I mean, that was like I think that was the one thing that is why I ended up making the decision to get an N64 was because I was like, holy crap, this game is amazing.
Wasn't that like the first major Hoth battle too?
Yeah, that was revolutionary. Like I mean, it was the first game where you could fly around, and like with a snow speeder or whatever. And like,
not the first game, bro. You're forgetting the Atari version.
Well, but I'm saying like realistically, the Atari version. Oh man, that game was bad. I actually have that. I think I still have the copy you gave me.
Oh, nice.
You remember that a few years ago?
Yeah, yeah.
I think it was before we moved to Florida. I think you gave me that. But so yeah, I mean, at the time it's so revolutionary because it seemed to me at the time like I was actually in the freaking movie. Like the graphics were so good, you know what I mean? Like flying around, like trying to bring down AT-ATs. So that game was completely revolutionary.
Yeah, that game was pretty good. Like one thing I always loved about it is that they referenced like a deleted scene from Empire Strikes Back where like they have
Wampas.
The Wampas, yeah.
Yes, it was awesome. They should totally put that back in the movie.
Yeah, they should. That's one edit I wouldn't really mind.
The famous Hoth Wampa attack.
Yeah.
And I remember in that game they had brown wampas that were just like randomly in caves. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, man, I forgot about that. But yeah, that was cool.
But yeah, when you go back and look at that game, like that game really hasn't aged well either. It's like so blocky, and like the polygons are so bad. But man, at the time it was a great game.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I think they could do that. I honestly think that there's enough good N64 titles out there, especially first party stuff. Mario Party, for example, the early Mario Party games were fantastic. And have you played any of the new ones in recent years?
I played some of the GameCube ones. I guess that doesn't really count as recent.
They were still good. Those ones were still good, but like in the past couple of games, they started really like making it like simplifying it to where like you can't really control your characters and where they go on the board anymore. You all are like in a group going across the board together. It's such crap. Like it's awful. And it takes away, they took away all the like stars and stuff that you would collect.
Oh man.
How you could like steal people's stars and like all that cool stuff. Cause I mean, that was one of those party games that like, just like Mario Kart, like you would lose friends over. You know what I mean? like you would play like one afternoon, you and some friends would get together and play that game, and then after that, you would never talk to each other again.
It is like one of the all-time most infuriating feelings in gaming to like have a star stolen from you.
Yeah, especially when you're winning and then someone steals your damn stars. But man, yeah, that was such a great game. And that, those, I don't know why Nintendo's done that in recent years, but yeah, I'm sure there's enough outrage from fans that, they would, backtrack on that. So I bought like the Mario Party 10 for the Wii U, and it was the same garbage. Like, yeah, I was so mad, I mean, I maybe played it for 30 minutes and then it's gathered dust. So Nintendo, if you're listening, fix Mario Party. We don't want no more of the simplified crap. We want it to be like the old days where, we rage quit and like, lost friends over it. And
yeah, those 3 Mario parties. Okay, I guess I can back a N64 Mini now just for those 3 Mario Party games.
Yeah, well, and just imagine if they did a Mario Party like they used to, but it was online multiplayer now. So that way, everyone, it would be amazing.
That would be, man. Yeah, I might buy a Switch for that.
Exactly. I'd be all over that, man. But yeah, I'm trying to think some other like really good N64 games that they could do with this.
How many do they have on the SNES? And then we could try to gauge the N64.
Well, they had 20. They have 21 games. That the 1+1 game is Star Fox 2.
So they could probably do like 15 games, I'm sure.
Yeah, like I think they could do 20. They could do Banjo-Kazooie. They could do, Super Mario 64, GoldenEye.
Do you think they do Conker's Bad Fur Day?
That'd be awesome if they did Conker.
I don't think they would.
Yeah, I don't think they would.
But that game is.
I've always wondered if Conker's Bad Fur Day. The only reason that ever became popular was just because of the fact that it was an M-rated game on a Nintendo console. Because it stands out like a sore thumb from the other library of games. But yeah, I guess a Conker.
Yeah, there was kind of like a meme, if you will, in the early 2000s that like the Nintendo consoles were for kiddies. So I think that Conker game was like a response to that.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they ever got past like Nintendo Q&A. Like,
yeah.
But I think it'd be really interesting if Nintendo one day. Can you imagine if like one day Nintendo was like, "Hey guys," like they did one of their like broadcasts, whatever, and they announced a new game, and it's something completely different than anything they've ever done before, and it's like a straight up hardcore M-rated game by Nintendo. That would just blow people's minds, man.
I mean, going back, you got Star Fox 64, you got Pokemon Stadium, you got Mario Tennis.
Yeah, Pokemon Snap.
Yep.
That game was underrated.
Yeah. Paper Mario.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Paper Mario.
Yeah. All right.
There's a ton of good games on N64.
Okay, I retract my early statement.
I would say they could pretty easily find 20 good games to do a best of.
Between Mario and Zelda alone,
you
got a good selection there.
Yeah,
then
have both Zeldas. Oh, Smash Bros. Heck yeah.
Oh yeah, Smash Bros. All right.
And then
Banjo-Kazooie, because
N64 is so underrated. Like I loved N64. It really was a great console. Donkey Kong. Don't forget Donkey Kong 64, Diddy Kong Racing. Of course, Mario Kart 64. I don't know if we mentioned that already.
I think it would be a shame if they didn't include GoldenEye on that one.
Yeah.
I think they'd have to.
Yeah,
I mean, that's such an
X.
It's like GoldenEye is right up there next to Mario 64 as the most popular game for N64. I mean, that was honestly, I think GoldenEye was the game that like even people who had PlayStation and PC were envious of back then.
Yeah, definitely. Like it had that like 4-player multiplayer. And...
That game was fun. I remember all the like weird like modes you could do with that, like paintball mode and stuff. Is
it odd that I always preferred Perfect Dark over GoldenEye though?
I like Perfect Dark a lot too. Perfect Dark was really good. Interestingly, it also was like a really fun game on 360. Yeah, like the sequel to that. Like that was like one of the best multiplayer games I thought on the Xbox 360.
Yeah, I mean that's
a ton of fun with that. you imagine if we would have had a game capture card and all that back then when we were playing?
Man, that would have been great.
Yeah. Zombies and stuff.
Yeah. But I think they could also do a GameCube one definitely pretty easily.
GameCube had a lot of really good titles. And I was, I had a PS2, but I also bought, like, that was the first generation that I had all the consoles when they came out. Like, I got PlayStation 2 first, obviously. Then I bought a GameCube. And GameCube was amazing. And it was the last time that Nintendo really tried to keep up with the other companies as far as, like, horsepower behind the console. Like, I mean, it was more powerful than the PS2. And it's still, there's games on the GameCube that by today's standards still look good. Like, obviously the Resident Evil remakes or Resident Evil remake, Resident Evil Zero are still really good. What was that noise? Is that thunder?
I think it was just a plane flying by.
Oh, really? Yeah. Wow. I was like, man, that was loud. But yeah, earlier Dustin had told me that there was going to be some storms rolling through his area. So I heard this weird noise and I was like, what the heck was that? Was that thunder? And surprisingly, there were supposed to be storms rolling through my area and it's kind of died down. So that's good.
Oh man! Now you got me excited if they ever get to the GameCube one, because you got games like Battalion Wars, which I loved.
There's so many good. Oh,
I know.
I just thought of another game. Sorry, for N64 that I would like was Battle Tanks.
I never played that one.
Oh, that's so fun! Remember playing that, Dakota? We used to play multiplayer on that all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, such a good game.
Was that one developed by Rare?
No.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember who developed Battle Tanks, but it basically was just like, it was kind of generic probably by today's standards, but like you had a bunch of different tanks to choose, kind of like Twisted Metal. Like it was basically vehicular combat, but you choose different, tanks. And like, I remember like the coolest special weapon was like a nuclear bomb. it would just like, you would shoot that thing and it would explode and it would like destroy everybody. And it was massive. But sorry. What were you about to say, Dakota?
I was like, I don't know, like the GameCube one, they could totally make a killing on Luigi's Mansion.
Oh God.
Super Mario Sunshine.
Yeah.
Pikmin,
Twilight Princess.
Wind Waker, I think.
Luigi's Mansion is like one of the best games ever. Like I love that game so much. And I really hope that they do not only a sequel on the Switch, but even if they just, I've heard rumors that they're going to be, with the Virtual Console on the Switch, they're going to start porting GameCube games over. I really hope that they port Luigi's Mansion over.
You know what? I want to see Beautiful Joe make it over.
Oh, really?
I like that game.
I never played that game, I have to be honest. I remember hearing it was cool. What was that? Yeah. Was it like a fighting game or?
Kind of.
Yeah. It was like a very kind of comic booky, stylized kind of game.
Yeah, I remember that was a big deal.
Oh, I totally forgot. Animal Crossing.
Oh, yeah, Animal Crossing. I'm sure we're going to see that on the Switch soon.
Yeah, Soul Calibur 2.
Yeah. Oh, there was a ton of Star Wars games on that, too. Like
my personal favorite of the Mario Karts, Mario Kart Double Dash.
Dude, one of the most underrated Star Wars games of all time, the Boba Fett one.
No, I never played that one.
Like Bounty Hunter.
Oh, you mean Jango Fett?
Oh, yeah, it's Jango Fett. My bad. Yeah. That was so highly underrated.
Yeah.
And then they had a lot of like Rogue Squadron type games that looked fantastic. I remember back then.
They still hold up.
Oh, yeah. They look amazing back then. Like, I remember like playing that because I have to be honest, I never really liked those games just because I thought they were kind of shallow, just the like space battles, I always preferred, thought, man, it'd be cool if you could, land your ship on the planet and, do basically Battlefront is what I was wanting at the time.
Folks had a choice, though. We didn't get Battlefront, so we had Rogue Squadron.
Yeah, but Rogue Squadron looked better than Battlefront. That's what I was saying. The graphics look way better. Do you remember, the Rogue Squadron that had the Death Star run? And
yeah, I remember all of them. No, it was best. Okay, what sold me on that one? Go back and play. I don't remember which one it is, but it's the Bespin Assault.
Oh,
the Bespin map. Those graphics still look better than some games today. It's weird.
It really was. I remember the for some reason the one that always sticks out to me was the Death Star run. I was oh my God, this is like exactly like the freaking movie. And then, of course, they remade the Hoth battle, which was even better, you know?
Yeah.
I think still to this day, though, my favorite Hoth battle, though, has to be the first Battlefront. Not Battlefront like the new one, but like the original Battlefront Hoth battle, you know, online and stuff. It's so cool.
I never played a whole lot of the first Battlefront, but I did play a lot of the second one. That was an amazing game.
Yeah, I'm like salivating just thinking about the new Battlefront. Dakota's evidently playing the alpha right now.
Yeah, I saw that.
I refuse to play because I don't want to spoil anything from
NDA, Rob. NDA.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to spoil it. I don't like to play alphas and betas and stuff like for games I'm really super hyped for. Like if it's a game that I'm not sure about and I'm kind of like on the fence about, then I usually will, you know, it gives me an opportunity to play it and see if it's something I'm going to like. But like with Battlefront, I know I'm going to like it and I'm not going to spoil that. So that way, day one, man, I can play some freaking battle droid action. Because I'm a big prequel fan, so screw the haters.
Well, yeah, I'm the same way. I've kind of like burned myself out like playing like the beta version of the game and then like have no desire to play like the final version. So I try to avoid that now.
Yeah, you can ruin it if you want, Dakota, but
it's an NDA, so
I don't want to hear anything about it. Don't be telling me anything.
I won't tell you.
I was sold. When I saw that trailer, I was sold as soon as I heard Roger. I was like, that's it, bro. I'm all over that.
All right, Dakota, just knock twice on your mic if it's good. You heard it here first, folks.
Of course it's good, man. Speaking of, like, this is totally off subject, and shouldn't even probably be talking about it in the podcast. But if anyone sees the first Battlefront game for $9.99 again, we need to grab that for game nights.
Yeah,
they jacked the price up, damn it, because it was like $9.99 one day, and the next day it was $29.99. I was like, I ain't paying $29.99 for that.
You know, speaking of that, you know, while we're on the subject of like the NES Classic Edition and all that stuff, didn't they just roll out like this? This is Xbox related, but now they're going to be going back to Xbox One.
Mm-hmm.
You think Sony's going to maybe do a full PlayStation lineup?
Oh, you're talking about doing like these little mini consoles?
Yeah, no, not exactly, but you know, PlayStation doesn't really have the biggest library for their PS1 games, right?
No, are you kidding me?
Yeah, come on, man. Are you crazy?
No, I mean, they have a good library, but you can't play it.
PS1 has the best game library in the history of games.
No, I mean, but they don't. That's not what I'm saying. I mean, currently that you can play right now.
You're talking about like through the store or whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that because that was like something I was gonna talk about towards the end, but we can go ahead and talk about that. And that was it's kind of, I think, on the same subject. So if not, come back to this, Dakota. But yeah. I was gonna talk about the virtual console and how I don't think that this is, you know, as far as like these little consoles, like isn't really wise for Nintendo because it seems like they could make a hell of a lot more money with the virtual console, right? Because for example, they released 30 games on the NES Classic Edition, right? Now, typically in their virtual console store, they charge about $5, I believe, $5.99, something like that, for NES games. And it's like $9.99 for Super NES games, and like N64 games, it's like $14.99. I don't know. I don't know the exact pricing, but it goes up with each generation, right? As far as
I know I paid, was it $10 for Majora's Mask on the 3DS at one point?
Yeah. So it's a much more lucrative for Nintendo if they were to, you know, say instead of focusing on these consoles, which I honestly would rather just buy the virtual console versions. That way I could play it on the go on my Switch, right? Than to go buy a dedicated mini console to have. I mean, really, I'm just going to buy this console to put on a shelf and keep it in the box as a collector's item, right? I'm not going to play the damn thing.
Well, I think they target totally different demographics, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, that's
like the less hardcore gamers, like casual gamers.
I mean,
or people who aren't gamers who just want a bit of nostalgia.
Yeah, or like lapsed Nintendo fans that love the old systems but haven't really kept up on the new ones.
True.
That makes me wonder, would the N64 one, if they did that, I don't even think that would sell very well. I mean, it might, because it'd be a steal to get all those games at that price.
Are you kidding me? No way. I can tell you this because I, buy and sell retro video games. Like I had a large collection of games and I would buy them, cheap and, resell and stuff. I had a pretty good business going there for a while doing that. And I can tell you what, right now, the hottest games, like the most lucrative market for retro games is N64 stuff.
Really?
Yeah. N64 stuff is hot.
But people are going to want the N64, not
like SNES is still really popular. NES is starting to kind of tone down a bit, but N64 stuff sells like hotcakes. I mean, I can't. It flies.
Really surprising to me.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't surprise me because think about the people like our generation, obviously, like because we're technically millennials, but we're like a little bit older millennials. For us growing up, it was NES and SNES, right? And then when we were teenagers, we were playing like PlayStation and N64 and stuff. But a lot of these kids, so to us, like to me, like I'm much more nostalgic for NES and SNES than I am N64.
Right.
Because that was like during like the time where I was like a child, and NES was like to me the best console that ever existed, and I'm extremely nostalgic for. So these kids, they were that age when the N64 came out, or PlayStation. So they're probably feel the way about those consoles that we do, say for SNES or NES. And they're at that age now where they're out of college and they're making their own money and they got disposable incomes. They're trying to buy back some of the stuff they had from when they were kids,
Yeah, that's true. That makes a lot of sense. I guess the older gamers like us have kind of collected what we wanted by now.
Yeah. Like Atari stuff, for example, like you can't even give that stuff away because no one wants it.
That makes me so sad.
It does. Yeah.
Because I was born in 81, so I remember playing Atari before the NES came out, and that's actually like still the system that gives me the most nostalgia.
Yeah. See, and then for me, it's NES. I'm a little bit like younger than you.
Yeah.
And so, like my first real console, like I played Atari and like, Coleco and all that stuff before I had an NES. But like when I first got my NES, I was probably around 5 or 6 years old. So I was at that perfect age where like I was capable of kind of, my brain had developed enough that I was like kind of, had my own personality and was like, into this and that. And so NES to me is like, like nothing gets me more nostalgic. Like if I go to a garage sale and I see like an NES, console poking out of the box, dude, I'm not going to lie. Like this might be vulgar, but I get a hard on.
It's those plastic
those NES cartridges, man. Oh my god.
For me, it's those damn plastic PlayStation cases.
Yeah, see, exactly. It's it's all about
seeing the green label, what greatest hits or whatever they're called, the green label.
Yeah,
those ones.
I'm telling you, man. Like, there's nothing in this world like compares to like the feeling. Like that's why I did it for a long period of time. Like doing the like buying and selling retro games. Like oh my god, dude. I got this feeling of like uncovering that stuff. Like when I would like go and buy something from somebody, like it was the closest thing that I ever felt to like, like Christmas morning when you're a kid, like that, like finding Nintendo stuff gives me that feeling as an adult. Like if I go to a garage sale and say, I'm like looking through crap and I find a box of NES games. I mean, it's like Christmas morning. Like it really gives me a feeling unlike anything I can't really explain. So
that's awesome.
Speaking of, you might want to look in your collection, see you have a copy of Siphon Filter.
Oh, I do.
Oh, you do?
I got tons of PlayStation games, man.
That's a game that
it sucks because PlayStation stuff right now isn't like it doesn't sell well. Like
not yet.
Yeah.
It may someday.
I mean, it's kind of like, and also I think one of the big reasons for that is because, with cartridges, like those things could survive a nuclear blast. Like, like old NES cartridges and stuff. I mean, those things could be cracked and you can even throw you can throw the board into another case and it'll work fine. But with discs, a lot of times, they're really fragile, and people, didn't really take care of them, so they get really scratched, and a lot of them don't even work anymore. So I think a lot of people are more hesitant to buy discs, like disc-based games, than they are. Like, I don't think there's ever going to be the kind of crazy nostalgia for disc-based games as there has been for cartridges. Just because, like I said, it's so hard to keep those things. And not to mention, cartridges are going to last forever, as opposed to CDs, which will eventually, break down. Like, I can't remember the life cycle of a disc, but I think it's like 20 or 30 years. And so, like, in 20 or 30 years, or like, 10 or 15 years, I guess, from now, most discs probably won't even work,
Well, I mean, maybe. Like, I actually like, this is a weird hobby I've never even told you about, but I have like a small little collection of like the very first like CDs that came out, like when the compact disc was first introduced in like 83, 84. And like, I mean, they work I think as long as they're well preserved, they generally should work fine. I mean, there is the whole bit rot phenomenon that kills some CDs, but
I've heard that at some point they just separate, like the like lining or whatever on the inside separates. Because I was reading an article not too long ago about how, basically most discs in like so many years are just going to be obsolete because they're just going to deteriorate. But I don't know, maybe it's longer than I said. Like, I might be mistaken. It might be a longer time span. But like cartridges, though, will literally last for, if you kept them clean and stuff, would probably last hundreds of years. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you they're not going to deteriorate like that kind of technology will.
That makes me wonder. That's a smart move on Nintendo to go back to them.
Yeah, well, I think I personally like cartridge-based technology more. Like, it's archaic in a way, but like I love having something physical. Like, we've kind of talked about this before.
Yeah.
But I like that Nintendo still has some kind of card, even though I don't know if you've seen the Switch cards, but they're so small that, like, I mean, you shouldn't even have them around small children because they'll be swallowed.
Yeah. So that makes me wonder, maybe that's why the SNES Classic Edition will do so well, because it's like a physical representation of the games rather than I'm going to play it on my Switch.
Yeah.
It brings you a little bit more.
True.
Like,
there's something about, like, I admit I still, I don't have like an emulator, because like I still prefer like blowing the dust out of a cartridge and popping it in, as opposed to, going on running some emulation and then just playing it on my PC. And there's something about it. It, like I said, it takes me back to being a kid.
Yeah.
But would you rather play SNES with the SNES controller, or would you play it with the Switch? That's kind of a no-brainer there.
I definitely would prefer the original controller. But like I said, what's great about the Switch, though, potentially, is that ability to play every game ever made. And that I was actually, we kind of went off on a tangent. But the one thing I was going to say, that what I don't understand why Nintendo does this is they're so slow to release games for the Virtual Console. Like, I remember when I had a Wii U, like, I'd be excited because they were like, oh yeah, they announced like Super Mario Bros. 3 is coming to the Virtual Console. But it would literally be like months before they would release other games. They need to like emulate. I don't understand, like, what goes into like emulation and stuff on the part of Nintendo to do that. But it can't be that difficult if like you can get every NES game ever made on a USB drive now, So I don't know why Nintendo isn't more, focused on pumping out those games and putting them on the Virtual Console so that people can play all these old games that they want to play. But it sounds like they're going to at least start trying to do that with this new like I'm sure you guys heard about that, like Nintendo like paid subscription thing they're going to have.
It's kind of like Netflix for games, basically.
So hopefully that means that they're going to really, look into like pumping out as many titles as possible.
They need to step that up though, because it's for it kind of lame.
Like, basically my ideal Virtual Console would be for me to go into the Nintendo shop, look it up, buy console, say NES, SNES, N64, and have every damn game that was ever made there at my disposal. That would be me.
if they like one thing that could cut into like the emulation and like ROM market too would be to include like prototypes. Like imagine like being able to play like the prototype Mario World.
Oh
Like
yeah, that'd be cool as heck. I don't think that'll ever happen though. Like
probably
that's
not.
a lot less likely. But thank God we have people out there that are preserving that stuff.
Yeah.
Thinking about it, that also begs question: if they do ever get to the point of doing an N64 one, they just be releasing another version of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, because I know they would include those on there. And they've already released those at least 3 times in the past 2 years. So
yeah. Well, yeah, they did for the 3DS. They did a re-release. Actually, it was kind of like an upgrade too. I know that they enhanced the graphics and stuff for it.
So games like that, I mean,
I'm glad that they did that with that game because that going back, like we were talking about, looking back at like Ocarina of Time and everything, right? The graphics haven't aged well. So from what I saw of the the remake of like Majora's Mask, it looked fantastic. Like it looked like they really went in there and did a good job of putting like higher resolution textures in there and stuff.
Yeah, the Majora Mask one is the reason why I bought a 3DS.
Yeah.
So I had the Majora's Mask 3DS.
But like
3DS XL or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if they...
I don't know how I'd feel if they went and like say made like a 3D side-scrolling Super Mario 3 remake. I don't know if I...
But if I don't know, maybe you'd say that.
Cool. I don't know. I mean,
say that, but if it was
I guess if they did it like they did with New Super Mario Brothers, I guess I could get behind that because that looked awesome. I like the New Super Mario Brothers games, and especially seeing the Koopalings in full 3D. I was like, oh hell yeah!
Well, I mean, I think it'd be
my boy Lemmy's in the house.
Yeah, Lemmy. Like, yeah, I think it'd be cool if they did do like HD versions of some of their classic games, like an HD Mario 3. I mean, it didn't have to be 3D. In fact, I think it'd be cooler if it was like a cool like hand drawn style or something like that.
Yeah, that could be cool. I guess I get behind that. Did you ever play New Super Mario Bros?
I played like a ROM of it for a little bit, but
it was actually really good. Like they tried to, kind of recreate the classic side-scrolling action.
Yeah.
But so they kind of like there for a while were branching off into like they had their 3D game, like the 3D open world, more like style of Mario games versus like going back and also trying to replicate the side-scrolling 2D platformer style Marios, So, but yeah, I don't know. But I think Dakota was kind of going this direction. Like since we talked about Nintendo and what they were going to do with it, I would like to see Sony hop in and maybe do like a console like this. Like do a little. Yeah. I mean, the file sizes of these old games are so small that obviously through emulation now you can get every PlayStation game on PS1 ever made, and the file sizes aren't that big.
You can put every PlayStation 1 game on a thumb drive.
Yeah, exactly. There's thumb drives now that big enough to put every freaking PlayStation game ever made on. So I would like to see maybe like Sony do like a PS1 mini console, jump in on this trend. That could be and I think the time is right to do that. I think the nostalgia is there for PS1 at this point.
I mean, Xbox announcing the Xbox One backwards compatibility just adds to the fact that it's hot right now.
Yeah. Yep. And Sony would make a killing with that, honestly.
Yeah, they would.
But yeah, I do agree with you. They need to, just like Nintendo, who's really slow to put like their classic games on the store. PlayStation needs to jump on that and get that going too. Like, I mean, they have a lot of PS3 games available, but like, I want to play like Twisted Metal 1, Twisted Metal 2, like I said, Siphon Filter. I mean, all those classic PlayStation games that, PlayStation had the best freaking library, I think, of all time. So, Metal Gear Solid. I could go all night naming off. Yeah. It had so many good games for PlayStation. And I think that was, nostalgia aside, obviously, NES is my favorite console just because I have such nostalgia for it as being a child. But like, if I were to like tell, if I had to name a console that I think was, I had to say, look, based on just games alone, what's the best console ever made? PlayStation 1 for sure.
I mean, it had Final Fantasy 7.
Yeah.
We didn't see any more.
I would say, I don't know, for me it would be a toss-up between the SNES and the PS1.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, the only reason, like I said, I probably wouldn't say SNES is just because I didn't actually have one. But yeah, I mean, SNES, I'm super nostalgic for.
The PlayStation, I think, would win just because of the fact that it was out for a very long time.
Yeah.
Too.
I can't remember like the exact number of games that came out for the PlayStation, but it's outrageous. Like,
if
you were to try to collect every game ever, good luck.
Yeah, they were releasing like sports games for it, like years after the PS2 came out.
Yeah. Actually, funny story. I had Madden that was like, was it Madden 04
on PlayStation?
On PlayStation 1.
Whoa.
Dang. Yeah.
That might actually even be like some of those like really late games that come out are kind of rare.
Money.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're worth money for real. You remember 989 Studios? No,
oh, yeah, you mean yeah, I remember
the company that ruined Twisted Metal.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
But I think some of 989, like I remember the reason I thought of that was because I remember at some point, like all the major like sports game developers had stopped producing games for the PlayStation 1, but 989, which is of course Sony's like in-house development studio, was making sports games still for the PlayStation 1 up until probably like 2005 or something.
Yeah.
Didn't they make Siphon Filter 2 towards the end?
Yeah. They made a couple of good games, but
I mean, I don't know. Siphon Filter 3 wasn't that good in my opinion.
Yeah, I never played that one. But I like the first one.
2 was probably my favorite.
I just remember my favorite memory of Siphon Filter was zapping people in the nuts with the
taser.
Did you ever play that game, Bond?
No.
They had this like one of the weapons of that game was like a taser, right? But if you like tase someone long enough, they'd catch fire. It was awesome.
And then they just screamed. They need to bring that game back.
Yeah.
Gabe Logan needs a return, man.
We're way off subject, but like, yeah, they did release, some crappy Siphon Filter titles for like PS2, and there were even Siphon Filter titles for PS3, but by that point I was like, eh. So, but
that was like, yeah.
I think that's probably a good place to go and end this since we're getting way off on tangents.
We've been off for a while.
Yeah, we just kind of, we kind of went into this podcast. We were originally going to talk about Grand Theft Auto. And then at the last minute, since, this whole SNES news broke, Lebo, who's not here, I think he should be back next week or maybe the week after. But he had recommended that we talk about SNES Classic Edition. So I decided to go ahead and talk about that a little bit.
I think GTA will be that's for another day.
Yeah, we'll definitely come back to GTA. I'm sure, we were going to do that because of the, what's it called? Open 4.
Yeah, the Open 4 modding.
Open 4 modding debacle that's been ongoing. So, but it seems like they finally fixed that. And, fans, what I find interesting about that, I will just say this, is I love the power of the gamers, like they went up against the studio and said, look, we want modding for this game, and we're gonna like destroy your ratings on Steam if you don't do it.
They were destroying every Take-Two game that they made. It wasn't just GTA. It was games like what other games like WB 2K17 was taking hits.
Wow, I didn't even know that.
Like their rate, I don't know if you saw their Steam rating, but of course it was, how they have the rating system of like high or whatever. Like it was like really low.
Yeah, I saw the GTA rating was awful.
GTA's rating prior to that was outstandingly positive, and now it's outstandingly negative.
Power to the people.
I mean, I think there was a graph that flew down quicker than I think I've seen anything. It's a straight line.
Man, that's like No Man's Sky territory right there.
God.
Oh, yeah.
I hope that company never makes another game again.
They were just a bunch of scammers, so I wouldn't worry about it.
Such a lie. So I was even hyped for that game, man.
Yeah, it looks so good.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to us go on our tangent. We might actually do that in the future, is maybe do some podcasts where we just have no topic and we go in and just BS, because that seems to be kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, guys, thanks for tuning in. And I think we're going to be doing, I don't think we're going to be doing a podcast next week unless something major breaks. So we'll be back in 2 weeks from now. So thanks a lot, and we'll see you guys next time.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.